All we ever do is just flop seats anyway.
That gets enjoyable.
I'm going to call our Finance Committee meeting to order for the 25th of March, 4 p.m. We have a quorum. First item on the agenda, public comment. Anybody with public comment that's otherwise not scheduled on our agenda? Seeing none. We have minutes that were sent earlier for the February 21st, the March 4th, and the March 5th meetings. Any questions on the minutes?
No.
Look fine.
A motion to approve?
Motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We're going to start off and review Article 13, which is the town pier, which the bids came back, but there's been some technical difficulties, and I think the town has administration has a slightly different course of action that they want to talk to us about. So, Ryan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So last, as you know, when we had discussed the town pier project, we had it originally intended to have it engineered, put out to bid with the number to be able to go into the warrant at ATM, to be able to start the work in October, November, December, and hopefully be done beginning of 2020. So we were able to successfully get the engineering done. We did put it out to bid. They were open last week. There were 4 bidders. One chose not to bid and sent us a nice letter saying that they chose not to bid. There were 3 bids, the low bid being just under $3.3 million, the high bid being just over $4 million. During the course of discussion with this, we have determined that there may be some issues with the bid in so much as they may not actually be the bids. There may be issues with the floats that were designed. The floating manufacturer may have altered the specifications that were provided to some of the contractors to bid on, which would create non-conforming bids. So we've had internal discussions on the way that we think is most appropriate to handle this, and what we have determined is the most appropriate way to handle this is that we will reject all the bids. We are making a recommendation in the technical amendments to put in a request for $4.5 million, which is $446,000 above the high bid. We're going to engage an engineering firm to review the previous specifications, re-engineer the project. Subsequent to that, and upon successful completion of town meeting vote and ballot vote, we will put the dredging portion out of that project out to bid immediately, because we have a window of time for the Army Corps of Engineering permits to do the actual dredging that needs to be done. And we still believe we can meet the time frames with this re-engineering and putting the actual replacement of the floating piers together, and meet the time frames of getting it ready and in place by the end of June 30th of 2020. We can't, under the law, we can't accept bids that have altered the specifications that we've put out. It's not a minor informality. It would be a major informality, a major issue for us. And so we feel that the best course of action is to reject the bids and put them out as 2 separate pieces to finish the part that has to be finished within the Army Corps permit timeframe, and allow us to review the engineering, possibly go back and talk to the float manufacturers about what the issues were with why these couldn't be built the way that we had specified them, put it back out in time to be able to engage the work still within the time frame that we have to get the work done. So that's where we're at, and Sheila and the deputy chief are here to answer any other questions if I can't answer them for you, but everybody in town administration feels at this point that this is the most appropriate course of action.
So it's $4.5 million to be voted on, 2/3 vote, and 50% at the ballot.
That's
if
correct.
It's successful, you'll bid out the dredging portion of this, which was included originally
Yes,
in your
that's correct.
plan.
Yes.
Do a re-engineering and then rebid. And I'm assuming you will not be ready for the summer season with the...
Even under the plan that we had, we wouldn't be ready for this summer season.
Okay.
It wouldn't have been done for this summer season anyway because of the timing of the work. So the dredging is a limited window that we would have had to accomplish first. So it was always the way we had envisioned it was always be ready for next season and not this current upcoming summer season.
Okay.
Do you think that's enough?
Whoops.
Do you think that's enough money? Are you
Uh,
concerned about the money?
Well, the low bid of 3.2 million with the, included the dredging, so we feel that 4.5 million. We do have, there is a little bit of extra money. We do have some money from insurance that is on top of the 4.5 million that we're asking for, so there is a little bit of money that we could have in turn otherwise, but I do believe it will be enough, yes.
All right.
And you can dredge now and then do the work later without having to re-dredge?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not a dredging expert, so that's why I had to turn to the other people in the room.
I like when I ask questions that just need a yes.
Sorry.
So the problem is the type of floating dock? Is that was the only problem, the type of?
Yeah, as we understand it, the floating dock, the one manufacturer of these floating piers that would have bid on it did make some alterations to what we had, and therefore made it non-conforming to what we put out.
So we can't just eliminate that and provide the product and let them do the labor? That's against the law to do that way? So we provide the proper dock and they
We
just,
still have to put those out and bid it again, all over again, even thinking about doing that, so.
okay.
I mean, it doesn't sound like we're gonna lose any time, if you couldn't do it this spring anyway.
The hope is that we don't lose any time. I mean, we're going to, once we successfully clear both hurdles, we'll be engaging ASAP to continue to move it forward so that we don't lose any time.
Denise? You're good?
No,
Joe?
it just strikes me that the competitive bidding then is a little less competitive. If you're appropriating $4.5 million, and everybody knows you're appropriating $4.5 million, there goes the 3.2 bid.
It certainly potentially opens that possibility up, but given the fact that I can't assure anyone of a quorum if we had a special town meeting to act on appropriation, it's unfortunately at this point the most logical way for me to recommend to do this.
Yeah, okay.
Brian, should we assume that the actual specifications are less or more expensive than the revised specifications? Laura?
Okay.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
Yep.
Do we need a motion, or what do we have to do?
Yeah, I think we need, you want a motion, obviously, on this, right?
I think we would want a motion as part of the technical amendments that we present, or they can do it now.
All right, well, why don't we take all it's in our technical
Yeah.
amendments.
Okay.
And, well, let me ask the question. There seems to be some question as to whether we can vote on these technical amendments today.
Oh, yeah. I think you could, based on the agenda wording.
Yeah,
We'll also have a meeting posted for tomorrow,
Wednesday. I think, I didn't see anything that would say we
It just
can't.
doesn't say voting on technical amendments, but what does it say again? Review warrant.
Of our warrant
articles.
article.
Which
Yep.
is exactly what we want.
Okay, so why don't we do the rest of the technical amendments, and unless there's an objection to the changes, we'll handle this all at one vote,
Okay, that's fine.
okay? So why don't you not go away? Any questions from the audience on this? Or, you guys are good? Charlie, Sheila, you're good with? Okay. So why don't we go into the technical amendments that we were sent?
Okay.
Take us through those.
So we, Article 8, we have a technical amendment, and this also impacts, so I'll take you through both of them at the same time. This also impacts Article 19, which is the enterprise fund budget as well. So last week, or excuse me, about a week and a half ago, we were approached by the state revolving fund that they are preparing to close Series 22, which is a whole series of clean water notes that we have approximately 7 or 8 notes within that series, and they have decided that it is now a good time to borrow all of that permanently. The expected closing date of that is in August of 2019. We were only informed of it about 10 days ago, so it was after we had already made the motions for the budgets and done everything. So there is Given the fact that we have spent the majority or very close to the majority of all the interim notes or any potential borrowings on those notes, they're very keen on us participating in the permanent financing. So in the general fund, it amounts to a technical amendment of about just under $94,000, bringing the principal and interest and debt service line from $9,071,000 to $9,165,000, which would bring the operating budget from $28.6 million to $28.7 million, and the overall total budget to $89.5 million. So the change was basically because, and this is one thing, the Clean Water Trust does have the ability to permanently borrow whenever they see market conditions fit to go into the market for long-term borrowing. So this is unfortunately kind of the way that this happens, and it happened to us last year too around this time. So with that being said, the sewer number is actually going to go up by about $630,000 because the majority of these loans are all within the sewer fund. The only loan that we're really impacted in the general fund by is the remaining portion of the Nantucket Harbor Shimo project, which was funded by via a debt exclusion. In the sewer fund, we have C Street, we have remaining funds from the wastewater treatment facility, and some other projects that they had in there as well. And there's some other pieces that don't impact. There's also $1 million for the septic betterment program that'll be borrowed as well. So it's about $628,000, taking the sewer budget from, excuse me, I have to look here, from to $8 million to $6,978,000, and then a total budget of $29,520,000 in expenses for the enterprise funds, taking their total to $45.4 million. It would change the anticipated revenues that we're raising from $7.8 million in the sewer enterprise fund to $8.5 million. So then the next is Article 10, and this was an oversight on my part during the review. During the capital program process, the capital program committee had recommended a replacement of Ambulance 1 in the amount of $325,000, which is coming out of the Ambulance Reserve Fund. So the new proposed total for Article 10 would be $13.6 million. It is noted on the next page in highlighted reference that that money is coming from the Ambulance Reserve Fund. Article 13, as we just discussed, was appropriating $4.5 million for the repair of the town pier. And then Article 20, which is the capital article for the enterprise funds. The airport has had issues with Apron Area 3 starting to crack due to the heavier airplanes that are going across it, and they had been looking into ways to repair it, and Mass DOT has come to them and said, we have discretionary funding that we need to spend before June 30th, and we think that this is a worthwhile project given the usage at the airport. The project has to be completed by June 30th. We have until August to actually apply for all the reimbursements for the funds. So given that timing, under Mass General Law, I cannot have a deficit in a capital projects fund without having some type of coverage for it. And given the fact that even though it's a state grant, DOR will not look at this as guaranteed reimbursement, even though we know that it is. We just received the commitment letter the other day. So the option that we need to explore is doing the technical amendment to allow the authorization for us to go to market and borrow the funds and then repay them with the grant funds when they're reimbursed to us no later than the end of August. And,
What's the amount?
pardon me?
What's the amount?
800,000.
800.
Yes.
And is it safe to assume you're going to manage this so that you actually don't end up borrowing any money?
It is safe to assume that I'm going to ask them to submit reimbursement requests as fast as possible between now and the middle of June to ensure that I have to borrow the least amount of money possible. But I can't guarantee you that I won't have to borrow some. But that's the way we'll manage it. So that
And what kind of transaction costs are associated with this? I mean, what the unwillingness of the DOR to recognize the commitment has got a cost associated with it. I assume at the very least it's the transaction costs associated with borrowing an additional
Right.
$800,000. Is it de minimis or?
well, I think nothing in municipal environment necessarily is de minimis, but it'll probably cost us about $4,000 to borrow this if we don't have to borrow all $800,000. It won't be an excessive amount, but there is a cost to doing it, yes. Which is why we're gonna try to mitigate or minimize what we actually borrow.
So these are a result of the fact we already voted on the articles, so we're just making technical amendments.
That is
That's
correct.
correct.
With the exception of 13, the pier. Any other questions for these guys?
No.
Okay, we vote all of these, so we're,
There's one more article.
oh, I'm sorry.
There's just one more. I
120,
mentioned
yeah.
this to David the other day. The Article 66, the noise bylaw amendment, I noticed that it didn't include the hours as all of the other sections of prohibited noise do. So rather than have somebody mention on town floor something about it, I thought we'd just put the hours in to be consistent with all the other prohibited noise.
Great. So, on the technical amendments to Article 8, Article 10, Article 13, Article 19, Article 20, and Article 66. Anybody want to move a motion to accept those changes as presented to us?
Motion to accept, change.
Second?
Second, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I think the additional article that we have to deal with is the request of the citizen who is put forth the bicycle article, and I don't see Ian here. Do we know if Ian's on his way, or do we have a proxy?
Ian's on his way down upstairs.
Ah, he's doing double duty.
I can get you started if you'd like, or if you want to wait for Ian, he should be done shortly, but I think it's in your packet.
Have you been duly deputized, Harvey, to speak on his behalf?
I have, yes. My name is Harvey Young. So on Article 71, we were hoping to get a
No,
positive.
Here he is.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'll let, and here's Ian.
So I apologize, but I'm upstairs with SPPF at the same time. So we're asking you to reconsider because did you get copies of?
Yes, we did.
Of the latest version from this afternoon?
We do, yes.
With the
Ally, you
gr-
have,
With the green ink?
well, I think we have red ink,
Okay.
but I think it's the same one,
No, actually,
slightly different.
Thank you.
thank you.
It's the update of the update.
It is the update to the
The afternoon edition,
Yeah.
the infamous
The
afternoon.
acronyms not be used.
Right.
And also, there was a change in the wording of database, thank you.
And I don't think your vehicles are driven by divers, but you have drivers driving your vehicles. So there is a typo in this. On the buffer zone section.
Really?
Yes, on the right side of the diver's vehicle is probably not what you intended.
Second sentence from the bottom of the paragraph.
You're right. But, one can be worried about the sea level rise, but even so, it is taking it a little far. So the principal difference was taking out the driveway component in 8714B. And there are at least 231 driveways on the crisscross the bike paths. And Harvey and I put together we've done a survey of every bike path on the island. And so this is the sort of thing that we're hoping to put on a spreadsheet that just shows you every sign, every crossing. So we think that probably with this provision, bearing this provision in mind, it's going to cut the expense down, the estimate from the DPW, by up to 80%. So from 80,000 down to 20,000. Because basically we're only talking, apart from removing signs, to ensure that in most situations, bicyclists and pedestrians have the right of way on the bike path. We're only talking about signage in major intersections at this point. And so that's, I can't give you a definite number, but I would say that's probably less than 40 in total. So the select board, the NP and EDC and BPAC the other day have all approved it. There was one dissenting vote on BPAC, which was Kevin Marshall, who said that because of the reservations expressed by the chief of police, he felt that he had to take that into account. And that was before we made this really, and so there was that aspect to it. So, and I'm sorry that he isn't here to discuss it. But I guess I'm not doing a very good job of really asking you to reconsider this. But I've had a number of people reach out to me just because I was the principal author. And Mark Deck, who has property in Lincoln, he's in his early 60s and has a house lives in Lincoln, but has a house in Union Street. He was hit 2 years ago with his daughter when they were in a tandem when a truck just came right through on the Paulpus Road. And the next thing he remembers is being medevaced up to Boston. And he made the point, concerning the fatal accident last year, that we're extremely lucky as a community that we haven't been sued. And so part of his point was that going forward, that actually regularizing the bike paths would be a good step towards trying to avoid these sort of incidents in future, and also putting them on a sound basis if, heaven forbid, it should happen. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
So as the DPW weighed in, I didn't hear them in the list of entities, or?
No. I mean, I think Rob's has made it clear to me that he would do whatever the law required. So I haven't asked him yet. It seemed to be putting the cart before the horse. I mean, I would have thought that with taking out the driveway component and reducing the signs, that he would be pleased. That would be good news for him.
What about the street painting?
In terms of eliminating some of the intersections right now, I don't have an ability to put a cost on that, but I wouldn't have thought it would be very significant. And a number of people have said that they would be happy to contribute funds. There's also been, I can't speak for Rachel Hobart, who isn't here, but she's a member of BPAC, and she has said that there are certain provisions that she felt would be within Remain's purview.
Okay.
And a couple of them that wouldn't be. So I would have thought, I would be very surprised if the sum basically couldn't be met by voluntary contributions, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So,
Does the administration have a position on this article?
I think initially we did feel that it was really going to be costly. And Ian and I have talked a bit about it, and I've talked to the departments. I don't think we have any major objections to it. I think we're pleased with the kind of reduction in the number of signs that would be needed. There was a bit of clarification there about who's going to determine some different things. There might be a bit of an issue about the provision of the medical reports or the injury reports out of the hospital, and who requests them and when they request them and that sort of thing. But that might be something that can just get addressed as we figure out how to
Administratively,
implement.
yeah.
Is it fair to, I mean, in terms of the chief of police and the police department, there's still some is skepticism the right way to, right verb in terms of how enforceable and this is actually going to be?
We have,
That part
We have
hasn't
a
changed,
yeah.
so, I mean, Charlie can address that if he wishes to, but my understanding from the chief is that there are some laws in progress now in Massachusetts to, and Jason and Harvey might know a little bit more about it, to address some of these things so that they will actually become laws that everybody has to follow, not just here. So probably those concerns are going to be addressed anyway.
If I may address the issue of data collecting at the hospital, there's a pulmonologist, Rick Knaft, who lives in West Hartford and has also actually had an accident here on a bicycle. He comes down here once a month. He has volunteered to do his best to set up the data collection in the hospital if this is approved. So I've spoken with him several times, although I haven't actually met him. The last time I spoke to him was several days ago. And also, I think Jason was hoping that perhaps the Nantucket database project would also be able to handle this, which would, I'm sure, would be a help for the police department. So trying to gather the information from separate databases. So I don't know if you want to address that.
thank you. Any other questions?
I have one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Don't we already meet, I'm sure, I mean, between, you drive down the road and there's reflectors in the road and the Department of Transportation, every time we build something, we must adhere to the signage and the, I mean, to say you want a sign doesn't mean the Department of Transportation says there's a sign, so there's gonna be confusion. So didn't we, when we built the bike path, put the proper signage in and the proper painting, and did we not follow it, and don't we keep up with that now?
Well, my understanding is that depending on when and from what source the funding came from was affected the dynamics of the signage and the path itself. So I'm not proposing if there's, like on the Cliff Road, where I don't even use the bike path because I just use the road, and, you know, get shouted at sometimes, but I just think that to stop half a dozen times in a few hundred yards is crazy. So I think Harvey and I found that every bike path basically has its own parameters for signage. So part of this, hopefully most of, if this was approved, it would go a long way towards making the most of the bike paths have the same approach. So, but the answer is I can't answer you specifically on Cliff Road or on that part of the Hummock Pond Road.
Yeah, I mean, I work for the federal government, so they tell us this is the sign you put on the building,
Right.
whether I believe it or not.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say, liability-wise, have we not met? And I thought, for instance, I thought we were the DPW, and maybe I lost track of this. We were all gonna work together to find some money or just do whatever we had to do. But obviously, we have to follow the Department of Transportation's
Right.
guidelines on
Right.
whatever we do.
And so, I mean, that's actually specifically referenced here, that the determination shall consist of recommendations after consultation with the Department of Public Works.
Okay.
So there's no question that, you know, if Rob told us this is what we had to do, then that would be it, you know, there wouldn't, I mean.
So the initial price was what, 80,000? So now it's down 80% so that would be 10.
That's 40, I thought. Did you say
Yeah.
40?
Well, I'm guesstimating, but on, you know, on a preliminary count, I would say it would be about 20% of the cost that the DPW has put down here. So 20,000, which, as I said, I'm pretty sure I can raise voluntarily.
My question is, with the amendment, with the exception of major intersections. So if I look at 5714A and B, bicyclists, pedestrians, and other users have right-of-way except for at major intersections.
Yes.
So that means at a major intersection, cars have the right-of-way. So
Well,
now
they-
we're setting up two different ways.
Well, they always do. I mean, basically, you know, a bicyclist, when a bicyclist comes off Milestone Road, doesn't have the right of way to cross Milestone Road, which is why I use that as an example. So I'm asking for a common sense approach where, you know, I mean, to me, it's about bicycle safety. So on minor roads where, you know, it's hasn't really been determined, where the motorist thinks that the motorist has the right of way, this is to ensure that the motorist actually, you know, the traveled way of the multi-use path has the right of way in that situation. But I don't want bicyclists, I mean, as a bicyclist myself, you know, I expect to stop and if necessary, and I do, I try to obey the law, especially because I feel that it sets a good example, that, you know, I stop. So, did I not word it
No,
well?
you
or-
worded it. I just, my reluctance with this or my hesitation with this is just the confusion from, I'm a bicyclist and I'm racing around and I have the right of way everywhere but at major intersections where I can flow with traffic. So I would have the same, I act like a car when I enter a major intersection.
Well, this is if you're on a bike path, as opposed to if you're coming down Orange Street and you're biking on Orange Street, you're being treated as a vehicle when you go
Correct.
into the rotary. So I'm only talking about if you're on an actual
Bike path.
defined multi-use path or bike path. So,
Yeah, I understand your logic and your explanation, and I still just, I'm not opposed to it, I just have some hesitation around implementation of it and people deciding who's in charge and who's, it should be clear and hopefully it will be.
Any other questions? Notwithstanding what Denise just said, I appreciate the work you all have done in trying to improve this. Oftentimes when citizens' articles, many times when citizens' articles come forth, they're not very well formed and thought through, and I appreciate the fact that you all have worked to produce something that hopefully is a better article and is easier to work, and I wish everybody would do that. But thank you for putting the time and the effort into that.
well, thank you to the town administration and to town council who also has been involved. So I really can't claim much credit when it comes to
You're probably being very modest, Ian. I think we need to vote to bring this back, since we've already voted this article, which was a take no action. And so,
So I'll make a motion to reconsider.
Second.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So now, is there a motion to change from take no action? I assume, not assume, we are certainly being asked to endorse and support this article.
Move to adopt the article as it is presented in version 2 from today.
With the green, the
The
red and
green.
the green, right?
The
With the
greeting,
green text and the edit from divers to drivers.
correct.
Actually, one other slightly, in your section, Ian, on the database, you know.
Yes.
It seems to me the first one says that the chief of police will maintain a database of motor vehicle accidents involving bicycles. Further on, where is it? I guess what I'm trying to say is, it seemed to be you modified this, so you're not requiring the police department and the chief to create a special separate bicycle database any further. It's now just, the police department will maintain a accident database, and you will be able to presumably search that for bicycle-related accidents.
Right. So my understanding was from Chief Pittman that they already have databases from a national software, and that national software breaks it into separate categories that are easily searchable if you have the manpower. And so that's why I added continue. And because he said he already has the databases. And
So then in letter C on the second page here, where it talks about for inclusion in the bicycle accident databases, is that word bicycle needed, or is that referring to a different some other bicycle accident databases as opposed to the police department's accident? I just don't want to make sure that we're saying this the right way, so I'm being a little picky, I guess.
well, that's a good point, because
Because I assume, like I said, I assume you were sort of, if you will, modifying your previous
Right,
language for a separate
right.
special bicycle database and just using the databases that the police department and the hospital already maintain. And so I'm just confused as to whether under letter C that the word bicycle in that sentence, is it needed, or is it referring to other bicycle accident databases?
So I hadn't caught that, and it would seem to me it probably would be smart to strike out bicycle. As far as I know, he doesn't, there is, at this juncture, there isn't a separate database
Right.
just for bicycles. So I certainly don't want to add any misunderstanding or, you know.
So why don't we strike the word bicycle?
Yeah.
Under letter C, that's
Yeah.
acceptable?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
All right.
So move to take positive action on this article with edits as just discussed.
Second?
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question.
Just,
Yeah.
okay, go ahead.
We don't talk about money at all in here. I don't think, unless I'm missing something. Can we put a maximum in here in terms of cost?
Well, you said they're gonna raise the money, right? You're not even gonna.
Or you're going to
pretty
totally
sure.
raise the money?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, I haven't talked to anybody who bicycles, really, who wouldn't like to have a safer experience bicycling.
I'm into that.
Yeah, so,
I just want to, maybe we can put it in a motion just to make sure that the liability-wise, we're just following all the, we're not trying to override laws written by the state or the.
right.
Yeah.
All right.
Anything else? All those in favor of the motion as presented by Joanna?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You have a positive motion from the Finance Committee that will go to town meeting, so
Well, thank you for reconsidering.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for your
Thank you.
Thank
work.
you.
Thank you for all the hard work.
Yep.
A lot of people involved, thanks.
It looks like we were unable to get anybody from the CRC, right? Contract review.
Yes, Dorothy was traveling, and I didn't get a chance to speak to her on the weekend.
Okay.
So should we try to get her for Wednesday if she's back?
That's a pleasure of the committee. Do you want to, if she's back, do you want to hear from her?
This was to.
Just a point of before we do that, on Wednesday, we're going to do anything that's, we haven't done today, and we're going to have a meet with the moderator, right? So typically, we don't have if she's back, we would have time to do it. I can't imagine this would take more than,
2 minutes. I mean, the proposal that Dorothy and I discussed was to set a limit for any request coming into the CRC.
Okay.
So anybody who's applying for funds in the future can only apply up to a certain amount, and that's it. So and that goes out with the 2021 instructions. So then that way people know as they're applying, they may want 150,000, but they can only go up to, say, 75. Those numbers haven't been determined yet. So that's the proposal that we discussed briefly. And it seems sensible because then people know in the 2021 discussions
Sure.
that they're going to have to find funding elsewhere for what they believe is the gap that they need.
And then no organization becomes overly reliant on the town's
Correct.
funding, should it dry up. Yeah.
Correct. So that's what,
Well, given that that's what we're talking about, I would be of the opinion to hear from her and take the 20 minutes or
Okay.
so. Certainly no more than 30 minutes is required, and then I don't know what their schedule is to get the instructions out, but to
Okay.
the extent that they occur before we get together formally again.
okay.
And then she would be the person who would communicate that to the hospital, because this was specifically sort of connected to their request.
Well, it would come out from Rachel's, when Rachel sends out the letters
The letters.
for instructing people how to apply for town funds.
When do those go out?
Yeah.
So maybe an informational letter before that.
Yeah, just to give everybody a heads up.
Yeah, before they get too far into their own budgeting process.
And I also spoke briefly with Rachel about it, and she was open to the idea as well, so.
Do you have to, you must have to take this back to the committee, or is this something
would-
that
I
can be
would
done
ass-
administratively?
I would love the latter. Given my preference and seeing how we've struggled recently to get a quorum at our committee. But I don't know, I'd have to check with I would look to the town manager to get some guidance on that.
Did you talk about it at all so far?
Talked to it, not in the committee, just with Dorothy. I talked one-on-one with Dorothy and one-on-one with Rachel.
Well, I would think that at some point you'd want the committee to endorse it,
Sure.
sooner rather than later. And then the informational letter is a very good idea.
Yeah.
That could go out this spring.
Mhm.
Okay, so why don't you see if you get Dorothy for
Wednesday.
Wednesday, and our order of business on Wednesday. Do you know what, Ally, do you know what the order of business is on Wednesday? We're meeting,
Specifically on the agenda was to discuss the technical amendments.
no, but we're going to meet ahead of the,
You're meeting at 1, and if there's any additional technical amendments, that's it, final, totally final. So if there's nothing else that happens after today, then they stand. Then you could do Dorothy right after that, if she's available. And then you've got the moderators conference at 2.
okay.
Okay.
So why don't we have Dorothy here at 1 o'clock? I mean, if you have anything, it's going to be
Are
pretty
those
small.
I have down 12 o'clock.
Yeah, I did too.
Is it 1?
It's 1. It may have been early on, 12, but I thought there was an outlook that went out that said 1. Can you double check that?
Yeah, I have noon also.
I've got 12.
Yeah.
It's 1. Well, I mean,
I'm
you
not
all,
sending out a new time frame.
No.
because
If
I'll
you-
screw it up.
let me,
Peter will.
Thanks for
let
the
me say
Saturday,
this.
Peter.
Ally, please double check the posting, see when it's posted out, and see what the Outlook calendar says. But if you all want to meet at 12, you can, but the moderators conference is definitely
Had
at
empty
2.
meeting.
And I'm not going to be there at 12 because I'm going to be at Rotary talking about all this.
All right, so why don't we
1.
do it at 1?
I'll tell Dorothy.
And have
1.
Dorothy here at 1,
Okay.
1:15. And Brian, you're not anticipating any financial changes, are you?
Between now and Wednesday?
Okay. All right. That's great. Okay. Anything else that people have?
No.
Somebody like to make a motion to adjourn so we can all go get braces?
Cliff?
Braces.
Second.
You missed
Braces.
the story.